Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Bike Karma Bicycle Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Brown. Welcome to the show. This is a big tent trying to bring all bicycle-loving people together to share stories and make connections. If you like to wrench, ride, collect, or do anything with bicycles, then this is probably the place for you. If you ride in the woods, it's probably crossed your mind, but today we talk to somebody who actually found a body in the woods. We then try and solve the mystery of why my Schwinn Varsity is so darn heavy. And then we talk to Glenn and Kasey from Kagey Caps about their adventures since the last time I spoke to them. You have a lot of podcasts to choose from, and I really appreciate you coming along for the ride on mine. Let's roll out. So I think it's totally healthy for somebody to have other interests besides their main interest. So besides being a science teacher and besides being a bike guy, I also like to relax and unwind by reading cozy mysteries. These are the cheeseball mysteries that, have cats in them most of the time. And they're never gory, and they always end with some type of justice or some type of happy ending where they find out who did it or whatever. They can be quirky, they can be funny. It's kind of like Murder, She Wrote. And it's almost cliche that people find bodies all the time within the first few pages. So either somebody will be walking or hiking or something like that, and it doesn't really bother you so much because it's fiction, it's a fantasy, it's escape. I mean, everybody from Agatha Christie to Sherlock Holmes to CSI Miami has used this plot device. And yet, being out in the woods and being out in, less traveled places, there's a chance that we might run into real bodies. And I've always wondered, what would I do if that was me? Well, I guess luckily I haven't found anyone. But here's a story from somebody who did. Rob Bunting found a body while mountain biking in the woods. And it wasn't a cheesy mystery, it was a person. And that's the difference. So let's hear Rob tell his story about finding a body while mountain biking in the woods.
When you find a dead human in the woods, man, it is a sobering experience. Hi, my name is Rob Bunting. I'm a lifelong rider. I'm now relatively recently a grandfather. I live in Connecticut, and I'm an artist. I'm a metalsmith, and I've always ridden, always will ride all kinds of bikes, gravel, road, whatever. I've got some stories. The best one is the one I'm about to tell you. All right. Well, this is a while ago, but we were visiting my in-laws in southern Vermont. My father-in-law had recently retired, and they were kind of in the bushes in southern Vermont, and we were there for Easter weekend. And if I was going to Vermont for a weekend, of course, I would bring my bike. So I brought my hardtail and took off for a ride on Saturday afternoon. And this was before cell phones. Nobody knew where I was going exactly. Went off in the woods. They were on an orchard hill, so there's a lot of cool stuff to explore, a lot of fire roads and that kind of stuff. So, and it was spring, so there's a lot of snow melt, so there were a lot of kind of spontaneous streams and a lot of water to deal with. So I rode into the woods a couple miles and crossed a lot of stuff. I came to a point where I couldn't ride anymore. I had to carry it. So I stopped and I picked my bike up, and I was just about to step over some fallen trees and stuff. The reason I couldn't cross was there were fallen trees and stuff, so I had to climb over some stuff. And I kind of did a double take because I saw a funny color up ahead of me, maybe 100 feet ahead of me, 75 feet ahead of me. Not even that far, actually. It was dark, and it was in the valley, and there was a lot of water, and it was maybe 2:30 in the afternoon, but in this little valley kind of thing. So anyway, I see this funny color, and I did a double take, and I'm looking at it. First, I thought it was a pine branch, like when a pine branch breaks off close to the tree, and there's that knob of fresh wood color. And I looked at it again. I was like, "What is that?" And it was a bare foot. And it was heel up, just one bare foot, and there was water all around it. And I said, "Oh my God!" And I first I thought it was just like a disembodied foot. I mean, it was that kind of darkness and wetness. And I followed it. I could see, it was blue jeans, and I saw a blue plaid shirt, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's a guy." And he wasn't moving, and he wasn't alive. He couldn't have been alive because he was not moving, and he was face down in the stream. They talk about fight or flight, and it isn't like on TV where I'll go check his pulse and check his wallet or whatever. It was fight or flight, and I was like, I had no idea if the guy had just been dropped by somebody or what. So it was flight for me. So I turned around, and I rode like a god. I was launching off of things that I would never consider doing before, and I had to climb up this hill. It took forever. It was, like I said, a couple miles maybe, and I just rode like I was possessed. I was in my mid-late 30s, so I was in pretty good shape. I just went terracing back to the house where everybody's getting ready for Easter. I walk in the house, and I've got this look on my face that I can only imagine. My wife is putting the cloves in the Easter ham, and she said, what's wrong? And I was like, I just found a dead guy in the woods. She said, "You're kidding." I said, "No, I'm not kidding." I was like, my pulse was probably about 190 at that point. One of my youngest son, my eldest son, who was pretty young at the time, came running in. He's like, What, Dad, what's going on? I tried to regain my composure, and I said, "No, I was off in the woods, and I found a dead guy in the woods." And which is like everybody who spends a lot of time in the woods nightmare. I mean, I went to school in Vermont. I spent a lot of time in the woods, mountain biking and everything else. And my brother's a hunter. That's always something in the back of your mind, like what, it's kind of the worst thing you can see. So I settled myself down. My wife decided to call the state police. There wasn't even a cop in the town. They had resident troopers in small towns in Vermont. So she called the resident trooper. They called it into the main office or the main whatever. And first the guy laughed. And he's like, "Who is this? What do you?" They had no missing persons reports, nothing. It was right on the Connecticut River in southern Vermont. So right up against New Hampshire. And then they realized that, she was serious and I was serious. And they sent a trooper out pretty quickly. And they did a quick interview, and he said, "Could you show us where it is? Would you show us where it is?" I said, "Yeah, as long as you have that Glock on your hip, I'll take you there." And so I got in the car, and we went down the hill and as far as we could up to this, there was like a little janky trailer at the end of where you could, drive a car. And we walked into the woods, for a little bit, and finally got to the point, and I said, "All right, he's right there, right there." So I think there were just two guys with me. So one guy stayed with me, and the other guy went up ahead to look. And I was like, yeah, I kind of feel like a wimp. I mean, I just, I saw it, and I like got the hell out of there like crazy. And he said, "Do not feel bad." He said, I was the first guy at a really grisly murder scene once, and out in the woods. And he said it took me a half an hour before I could gather myself to walk up and, check things out. So I said, "Oh, I guess whatever." But I still felt like, wow, it was not like in the movies, So the other cop checked him out. Yes, he was dead. I can't remember. I think he had ID on him because they knew who he was. And it turned out they called it in. Turned out that he had been missing for a couple of weeks, and he was from the Midwest. And they think he had become despondent because he couldn't hold a job, and he was kind of wasn't doing very well. Anyway, they got him out of there, and that was like the worst thing that I've ever, the worst experience I've ever had biking was that happening. And there was only one road out of the only way into town was past that road. And I had a movie date with my wife that night. We were like, oh God, we got to go past that road to get out of here. And I kept imagining what he would have looked like. And I mean, it's all your worst nightmares. And it's actually a large part of the reason my in-laws moved from that house, because they just couldn't get past the image of this poor kid. He was like 20 years old, and it was pretty horrible. It took me a couple of years, seriously, before I could ride in woods again on trails that started to close in around me. I needed to be like out in the open and, freewheeling. I would turn around. I would get to a close spot where the trail got tight and nope, not doing that. Turned around. Took a couple of years. Got over it, but it was pretty bad.
Would you ever ride that trail again?
Oh yeah, now I would. I mean, it was a long time ago, and it was a one-shot deal. He basically, I have thought about it. Like, what are the odds of finding something like that twice in your life? And I decided they were way outside, hitting the Powerball lottery, but. He went off in the woods. He had to know where he was. He had just crossed the Connecticut River. The cops think that he just decided and, walked in the woods until he couldn't go anymore. He was barefoot, for one thing, and it was April in Vermont. Apparently, and the cause of death was listed as hypothermia. And apparently what happens, a lot of your listeners will know this. When you start to become hypothermic, you start to do weird things. Your body tries to preserve your core heat, so it starts to shut down the blood supply to your extremities and your brain, and you start to get confused. And a lot of times they'll find hunters lost in the woods with their clothes piled up on a rock, and they'll be naked or close to it because they get hot. They just get delusional, and that's probably what happened to him. I mean, he was barefoot and, on a rocky trail, a really gnarly trail, so he wasn't in his right mind. The cops told the parents, it was, like I said, before cell phones, before, the web and stuff. The parents had called anxiously for weeks to see if there's any news about their son, and they were actually on their way from home in the Midwest in their car, and they called in and they finally got news that, we might have found him. And the mother actually sent me a note, and it was their only child that married was their only child. And she told me a little bit about his history, but she said, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to talk to you. And she left me her number, and I called her, and I probably talked to her for almost a couple hours. I mean, I think it was this thing where I was the last person to have a connection to her son. There was some kind of thing. I was the last person that saw her son that wasn't a cop or whatever, and it was really heartbreaking. I mean, it was hard. I was a young dad then, and now I'm a grandpa, so I can totally see it. But yeah, it was.
Well, at least it helped to bring some closure to the family.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, that mom was really grateful to have somebody to talk to bring closure to it, because what's even worse is if you didn't find that body.
Exactly, yeah.
And that hard enough losing a kid, but never knowing what happened to them would destroy, the rest of your life. Yep. So, I mean. Yeah, no,
I felt really good about that conversation.
I think you did a good service there.
Yeah, no, it was like, how could I not call her? Here's the mother of this kid, and she reaches out, and I was like, man, it's like, you talk about a human moment.
Well, thank you, Rob, for sharing your story and helping us to see the other side of finding the body in the woods, helping to bring closure to a family. I appreciate it. You can go see his pictures and his cat and his bikes and his other adventures at Rob Bunting. That's rob.bunting on Instagram. basic design of a bicycle hasn't changed very much over the last 100 years. So it's kind of that double triangle design, the double diamond that we all know. One thing that has progressed quite a lot is the weight of bicycles. The weight is considered to be one of the big things that determines the quality of a bike. The lighter the bike, the higher the perceived quality. So we've gone to different materials. We've gone from steel to different types of steel, to aluminum, to carbon, all looking to remove some of the weight from the equation. Why does lighter mean better? Because if a bike's lighter, it requires less effort to pedal. And if there's less effort to pedal and you put in the same effort, you can go faster. But just like when you try on your suit that you got married in, things have changed over the last few years. So when you go to pick up an older bike, you might be surprised by how heavy it is, or how heavy it seems to be compared to your modern bike. In my mind, I've kind of classified bikes into the following categories by weight. There's a two-handed bike, where you need two hands to lift it. There's a one-hand bike, and then there's 4 fingers, 3 fingers, 2 finger, or the lightest bike would be a 1-finger bike, meaning that I can lift that bike comfortably just with 1 finger. And believe it or not, there are bikes out there that you can buy that you can lift with 1 finger. This is a story about a bike that is not a 1-finger bike. In fact, it's curiously heavy, like heavier than you'd expect it to be, even for someone dealing with vintage Chicago-made bikes. So come explore as we apply the collective brain trust of the 2018 Wethersfield Bicycle Swap Meet to the problem of, why is this Schwinn so heavy? All right, so we have the collective brain trust of the bicycle swap meet. We are looking at an old Schwinn Varsity, and we want to know if this was made with solid steel or if it's a weighted version, because it's the heaviest bike that we've ever lifted.
Well, that's because it's a Varsity.
It's a Varsity. This is a solid
There's
fork.
a motor in that frame.
Guaranteed to be impervious to running into
It's
curbs
flash welded.
and walls. Yeah.
It weighs as much as a gorilla.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's-
how
Well,
it's a Varsity. That's what they're supposed to weigh.
This is exactly how my Varsity was set up, with the generator lights and the racing fenders. My bike weighed 37 pounds.
Full brazing and all the lugs.
Yeah, this is a forged fork.
Is there lead inside of here to make you train harder or something, or what?
You do not have to add training weights to
Did they
this.
stuff
come
pennies
built in.
inside the...
Exercise bike. It gives you the maximum amount of exercise possible.
All right.
When I bought mine, I bought it from Jack's Bike Shop. He says, yes, we have Schwinn racing bicycles.
Did they sell this by the pound? And you guys used to work in bike
It was a
shops.
good deal by the pound. They were, mine was $95.
We sold them at Western Auto, and
Mine was $95.
we had tons of them. This is a sky blue color. They come in, what was the orange?
Well, I don't know. I had lemon
yellow.
I had a green one.
Pearl red.
That was lime green, I think it was
It's more
called.
like emerald.
Kind of a metallic-y kind of look
Metallic-y,
to it,
yeah.
yeah.
And you gotta love the seat.
And the orange ones, they were.
Nice post.
I gotta say, this is the only bicycle without a motor on it that I would be scared of it falling on me and not being able to lift it off.
You know, it's got Schwinn approved parts.
That's right.
Thank God
And
for
if
that.
it's approved by Schwinn,
There you
it's
go. What
gotta
could be
be
better?
good.
Those are the days of the franchise stores.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
heavier the
Well,
better.
thank you very much, the brain trust of the Wethersfield Bicycle Festival. Thank you very much. Solving the mystery. I know this episode took a little bit longer than usual to get out, and I really appreciate your patience. There's some special things in the pipeline. I got to interview Mike Wolf from American Pickers. I got to interview William Bevington, the author of Japanese Steel. Yup, that's that Japanese bicycle book that everybody's gonna want for Christmas. I also got to talk to the lady who wrote the article about the bicycle that was uncovered by a glacier melting. Yeah, and this isn't even my day job. I talked to a college student who designed a bicycle that can be ridden on Mars. I've been working hard, people, and I really appreciate your patience with me for taking a little bit extra time to get this episode out. For all the people whose interviews and segments and stories are in the pipeline, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And whoever downloaded in Mongolia, high five. High five for you. Now back to the show. So imagine looking at a guitar. Right on the fretboard are these little dots, and they occur only on certain frets. And sometimes the little dots are plastic, but other times they're made out of oyster shell, and that's called mother of pearl. And they're carefully cut and inlaid in there. Sometimes they're just dots, and sometimes they're like birds or other things. Well, now imagine the top of your bicycle. So follow your handlebars towards the center, to where it meets the frame and the tube. That's the stem, and right on top of the stem is this little circle on modern bikes called the top cap. Now imagine taking the fretboard and having an idea that includes the top cap, and that's what the folks at Kagey Caps did. They took the artistry of wooden shell inlay and they brought it to this little tiny coin-sized top cap on the bicycle. I thought they looked really cool. And so I wanted to interview them, and I finally caught up with them at NABS, the North American Handmade Bicycle Show. And unfortunately, the recording that I got there was it was great, the story, but the quality of the recording I just couldn't use. So we re-recorded just a little while ago, and between NABS and then, so much had changed. So this is a montage of the adventures of the folks from Kagey Caps.
You've had lots of adventures since the last time I saw you.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of thinking about that.
You went for a bike trip across country and your bikes got stolen. Did they get recovered?
No, they're it's still on the offer. Apparently, the guy is in jail in another state, but the local police can't get to him for some reason. So
yeah.
I'm Glenn Phillips. I'm from Clintwood, Virginia. Currently live in Petaluma, California. We're a part of Kagey Caps, and I also work at a local bike shop, Beachy Sport, here in town.
I'm Kasey. I'm from Southern Maryland, and I also work at Kagey Caps, but my day job is working for White Industries. They make bicycle components.
Yeah, so actually when we were at NABS, it was kind of an interview with White Industries. Kasey talked with Alec White of White Industries and ended up accepting a job. So we packed all of our stuff up and we decided we were going to do a mountain bike trip across the country. So first stop, I think we made it to Indiana. We didn't get to ride there, but then we rode in Kansas City. Then we actually got stuck in a blizzard in Kansas. That was another crazy experience where they actually shut the road down. Then we ended up in Colorado. We ended up actually meeting James from Black Sheep while we were in Colorado and got to ride around there, which was really, really great riding. Then we made our way over into Utah, and then we got to ride Moab for a couple of days, which was absolutely amazing. And then we met one of her friends, Kasey's friends, from when she lived in New Zealand, and that night we came back and the bikes had been cut off the vehicle. They had gotten stolen.
I've been following you guys on Instagram, and I was happy to finally get to meet you guys up at NABS. And then, okay, wow, I'm jealous. They're out on this big bicycle tour, and then I see the picture of the back of your bike rack on the back of your car with Dan's bikes, and I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
That was how we felt.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things when it happens, like the initial. Actually, I asked Kasey, I was like, did you bring the bikes in last night? And then, that's when we both had that really awful sinking feeling, which was a pretty traumatic experience, as you can imagine. It's kind of bad because you start kind of, I don't know, judging people in a way, just kind of overly suspicious. So I think that's probably the worst part of it, is just it kind of colors your perspective of people, and it's not necessarily in a good way. So.
You actually were able to kind of figure out what happened to them?
Yeah, so we posted to the local Salt Lake City mountain bike group. We ended up having like 10,000 people or something saw the post, which was pretty amazing. But actually someone from Bike Index, which after we submitted the police report, we reported it to them as well, and they found it on OfferUp. It was kind of, hopeful at one point because we thought we were going to get the bikes back, but that's what's kind of weird. It's still on OfferUp, and we don't have any bikes, so.
So can you imagine being able to see your stolen bicycles online, and because of a technicality, the police can't do anything to the guy who posted them there because he's been arrested and is in jail in another state? It's kind of crazy, but happened to them.
So I was kind of in a dialogue with the police, which is kind of a weird thing where the police are very busy people, and it was kind of funny, felt like you had to pester them a little bit, but, they probably have better stuff to do than look for our bikes. But they were actually really, really helpful and informative. But like I said, what ended up happening is the person who stole it ended up getting arrested in another state, and they apparently can't contact him or something to find out where the bikes are. And another interesting tidbit about that is when I had sent out the message to the Salt Lake City mountain bike crew, one guy actually sent me another person's profile and said, if I had to guess, this is the person that stole your bikes. And pretty sure it was actually that guy. And that was like the day after. And then once we saw his profile on OfferUp, it was, confirmed that it was the same guy. Pretty frustrating experience because, the worst part about the whole thing was once they were stolen, like we still had to get to California. We didn't have a place to live yet. So that was another pressure that we kind of had to deal with that, you don't ever plan for that in your trip. So that was pretty devastating.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that happened to you guys. Have you ended up getting new bikes since?
Yeah, I ended up getting a Trek Slash, and then I've got a cross bike.
Yeah, I actually purchased Alec White's old bike off of him. We're a pretty similar build and weight, so yeah, I have a Nolly with all White Industries components, so riding the brand.
Wow, that kind of worked out good in the end then, I guess.
It
Even though it was
did.
traumatic at the time.
Yeah.
I try and be all zen and about stuff and kind of try and let it go, but I find myself periodically when I'm looking on Craigslist still kind of like keeping an eye out for my old bike that got stolen about 6 years ago from the garage. And it's not so much that I need that bike anymore. It's just it's the closure. I need closure. I want to know what happened to it. I want to know where it is. I want to know who's riding it now. It's kind of like, it's like you have a relationship with your bike and then you miss your bike and you just want to know what had happened to it,
Yeah, and that's what's kind of weird about my bike. I mean, hers never showed up online, but you can go on OfferUp right now and see it. Like it's in this weird kind of purgatory situation where, I can see it, but I can't do anything about it. And that's almost worse, I think.
I can't imagine. I would probably go to look at it every few days and just be like, is there any updates? What's it doing now? Oh, man. You love your bike. You get with a bike and you try and personalize it and you do little things here and there, and that's what you guys do. You make custom top caps.
So she uses all types of woods and shell materials to make these amazing little teeny pieces of art, which are like just slightly bigger than a coin. I asked her how she started making these little miniature pieces of art.
We got started one drunken night on the couch when Glenn finally figured out what I did for a living, and he was like, I think you should do that on bicycles. So it kind of started as a joke. I just tried to see if I could make it happen for him, and I made him a cap with his school logo on it, VMI, and he took it into the shop, and the guys really liked it, and they were like, you should do that. So that was kind of the start.
You're using materials like different wood and mother of pearl inlay, and you're making some really intricate designs. So what type of technique do you use to do that?
It's CNC machining. Yeah, I just took what I had been taught how to do on guitars and just transferred it to a much smaller piece of material. We actually got started on the wood because one of Glenn's coworkers wanted a wooden top cap, and he asked us if we could please try to make a wooden top cap, which I did. And I didn't make it out of the most stable piece of wood, and I took it into the shop and let them try to put it on a bike, and it immediately broke. So
I was the one that actually tried to put it on the bike, and it was beautiful. It's a design that we've done plenty of times since. It's the compass design, but that was the first one, and it was really awesome. But when I put the bolt in, I also used a countersunk bolt, which was probably not a good idea, and it just exploded. So that was kind of a fun learning experience.
Yeah, I went to the bar.
How long did it take you to make that cap?
Probably like a week of designing and planning, and then it took me, it was all day to actually fabricate it. But yeah, so we learned that you can't make top hats out of wood, and there's a reason that no one else was doing that. So we started, I think it was actually my boss at the time had the idea to cover it with a veneer, because we had just been inlaying the actual metal the aluminum top caps themselves. So she was like, well, what if you just put the wood on top of the aluminum, the way they do with fretboards on top of the neck base? That's what we ended up doing, and it worked a lot better.
People call you to customize and do designs that they've seen already that you've done. They could ask you to do those over again, but they also give you custom work as well.
Yeah, people really like the whole custom side of it. Yeah, we were really successful in Maryland. The shop that I worked at was very generous and let me use the machines when they were down. And on the side, Olsen Inlay, shout out to them because they really got us started.
And we talked about, in another episode, I had talked to Jen Green, who had done bicycle head badges, and that's another place where people like to customize them as well. And she had gone over some of
amazing.
So you could have a matching head badge and a top cap as well.
Yeah, we actually had a customer. I know for sure that there was one salsa warbird that we did a cap for this lady, and she also got the head badge done by Jen Green.
What was the most unusual custom job you've been asked to do?
We had someone that basically wrote us a poem of what his girlfriend's happy place was and asked us if we could please turn that into a cap. So that was an interesting experience because it really had no guidelines, just like a series of words and images. So it's been one of my favorite designs that we ended up coming up with. It was the cap on my bike when it got stolen. I was a little bummed about that.
Oh no, that's beautiful though. That's amazing.
But I think we titled the design Happy Place. I think you can find it on our Instagram feed, but yeah.
And what it's supposed to be is kind of like if you look up into the woods from the ground and just kind of see the trees and the light and how all that looks from the ground. And it's very abstract, but it was also very nice.
It's like the smallest art ever. It's pretty amazing. And so
you should see the tweezers that she has to pick the pieces up and put them in there. I'm a little removed from that aspect of it, and when I see her pull out the tweezers, I'm always super impressed.
I can't even remember all the ones we've done.
Yeah, I think we're up to around 100 right now. One kind of neat Petaluma story. So when we moved out here, of course, we didn't really know anybody through White Industries, obviously, and just being in petaluma in general. It's just a crazy amount of bike people and bike frame builders. I mean, Soulcraft, C-Tip, Retrotech, all those guys are out here. Bruce Gordon. But through a friend at work, someone mentioned that we should meet Ross Schaefer, who you founded Salsa. We were fortunate enough to meet Ross, and he's actually kind of teaching me some of the machining parts. And ironically, he's building guitars now. So, we went from guitars to bikes, and now, the founder of Salsa went from bikes to guitars. But it turned out, actually, that the place that Kasey worked for actually sold him shell for some of the inlay. So that it was just kind of like the world seemed a lot smaller when we heard that.
Well, thank you guys for being so incredibly patient. If people want to go see the Happy Place or any of your other designs, where should they go?
If you want to check out our work, we actually have a website now, Kagey Caps, and that's KageyCaps.com. We've got some of our stock stuff there, and people can also contact us either on the website or through Facebook or Instagram.
Well, thank you very much, and great luck out there. White Industries, wow. That is living the dream right there. I wish you well, and thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Well, you got to the end of another episode of the Bike Karma Bicycle Podcast. I'd like to thank the band Mobjack for our opening and closing music. You can check them out at mobjackmusic.com or anywhere where you get music. I'd like to thank Rob, Glenn, and Kasey, and all the people from the Wethersfield swap meet this year who helped figure out why that Schwinn was so heavy. I want to thank all the people who've downloaded over 25,000 times in all 50 states and over 50 countries, now including Mongolia. Big wave. I'd like to thank all the people who sent well wishes for Tarran having his appendix removed. He is recovering nicely.
I'd like to thank PBGB24BB05 for following. Also, PobBob531 and PBGOD2A60F. Thank you for following.
That was kind of like a vision test almost. I'd like to thank Classic Dropouts up in Maine for sending me some cool stickers.
Yeah.
While the show is mostly a commercial-free labor of love, if you have a product like cool frames or really cool wool socks or helmets or what have you to do with bicycles, hit me up. We can talk about it. You can email me at bikekarmaguy@gmail.com. The Bike Karma Podcast is the intellectual property of Thomas Brown. All rights, including copyright, trademark, and everything else, are reserved. Well, Tarran, you know what time it is. Time for the ABC Quick Check. You want to help me out?
Yeah, sure.
So A is for
Arrogance, #1 cause of death. I thought of that right there.
arrogance. What about appendix?
That too.
No, we can't check that anymore because it's gone. All right, what is the ABC Quick Check really for?
Air.
B?
Brakes.
C?
Chain.
You forgot, didn't you?
No.
Yeah, well, I'll give it to you. You've been out of commission for a week. So check all the parts of your bike before you go on a ride because you never know what might come undone in between rides. Somebody bumps into your bike or some nefarious individual will touch it and do something weird. So check your bike before you go barreling down the hill.
What is nefarious?
I don't know, it sounds bad.
Why don't you just say bad? Some bad person.
All right, well, we could do that.
All right.
All right, dude, I guess you're trying to keep it wheel.